Hey guys, it's me, it's Queen Osset Haru, and thank you for joining me for another wonderful edition of Ask an Aquarius. If you haven't already, please hit the red subscribe button and smack the bell. Alright guys, if you like this video, remember to give it a thumbs up and pass it on to all of your wonderful friends and family who may want to hear what I have to say. Okay guys, and leave a comment in the comment section if you can. Now, one of my regular commenters, Jordan, my buddy, asked me in the comment section to talk about what happens if your Voldemort is a family member. Now, many of you know from watching the show that I use the term Voldemort that comes from Harry Potter is for somebody who's evil. Basically, somebody who's evil, somebody who's abusive, somebody who's negative, an awful person that you had the displeasure of being around is your Voldemort. Many of us have more than one Voldemort. Voldemort can be your ex-boyfriend, it could be your ex-girlfriend, it could be your mama, it could be your cousin, it could be anybody who treated you badly, anybody who has abused you, especially over a long period of time. So for many of us, our Voldemort or Voldemorts will be family members. Many of us, they're lovers, because lovers and family members are the two groups of people that are the closest to you. So what do you do when your Voldemort is your dad? When your Voldemort is your sister? When your Voldemort is your cousin? What do you do when it's a family member? So when a family member abuses you, it's the same exact energy as when a lover or a stranger abuses you. See, the problem is that in our culture, we're not taught that. In Western culture, especially, I know in some of the communities is more so than others, but in our Western culture, we're taught that blood is thicker than water. That's the common term. So basically, somebody who's related to you by blood is supposed to be more important than somebody who's not related to you by blood. But that's not true. I dispute this every time somebody says it. Because to be honest with you, the people in my life who have had my back the strongest were not related to me. The people that I rely on right now for emotional support, donations, all kinds of stuff. People who really give me ideas, send me gifts. None of them are family members. Now, I do have a relationship with my family. My family does send us things and we call each other. I'm going to see my family in a couple days for a wedding. So we do have a relationship. But notice I said who I rely on the most. I am 42 years old, and the people that I have relied on the most have always been non-family. Because I have always had this thing about doing things myself, number one. And number two, I have a really great relationship with my support system. And my family, my immediate family, I'm going to say, we're okay. But we haven't always been. So there's times when I've totally stopped talking to them, to be honest with you. There's times when I've stopped talking to them. Not my brother. I've always pretty much talked to him. But there have been times when other people I wasn't talking to, wasn't dealing with, different things along those lines because of something that they did. And I don't believe in letting people abuse me because they're related. So when you ask, what if my Voldemort is family? I would say deal with them exactly the same way you would deal with any other Voldemort, anybody else who abused you. So if your father is taking advantage of you, if your mother is talking down to you, if your sister is acting like a bitch, do the same thing that you would do with anybody else. Some of the times you have to separate from them. Sometimes you need to go live in another country. Hint, hint. Sometimes you need to go live someplace else. Sometimes all that togetherness is a tad bit much and you'll love them a lot more from a distance. Hint, hint. Okay? So some of the times it does take to actually move away. And some of the times it just takes to be independent. Because one time I've noticed that family members will abuse you the most is when you are dependent on them. I would say get independent. If you find yourself dependent on them and they're acting like Voldemorts, become independent. Start taking care of yourself. Find a way to get your own place across town, across the country, across the world. You know, when your Voldemort is your family member, you need to create distance a lot of times. And for me, like I said before, I believe in maintaining the relationship as best you can. You know, sometimes that's not possible. It depends on how bad the infractions are. Like, for example, if your mother, I'm going to just say your mother, if your mom is rude and verbally abusive and really negative, you might not want to cut her off completely forever, but you may want to give yourself some distance and only see her a few times a year. You know, maybe send her some gifts or, you know, something like that in the mail, you know, from a distance. You know, it depends. If your father went in your bank account and stole your inheritance, you know, and then went around lying about it and bad mouthing you to, you know, the family, then you may not want to maintain that kind of relationship. You might need to, you know, not see him, you know, anytime soon, if at all. You know, it depends on what happened. And it depends on the level of abuse. If they've been physically abusive towards you, sexually abusive towards you. I know a woman right now who still maintains a relationship with her stepdad who sexually abused her. And I asked her, like, why do you even bother with him? And she was like, well, I feel guilty about not having him in my life. And I was like, why? And she's like, because he's family. And I'm like, but he abused you. You don't have to have him in your life. He's dangerous. You have children, you know, and this is what I was saying to her. I'm like, you don't have to have him in your life, but she was made to feel by other people in the family that she can't turn her back or distance herself from him because he's family. But he abused you not only as a child, but continues to abuse you verbally now. So you have to keep him in your life because he's your family? No, the hell you don't. You never have to see him again. If somebody is abusive towards you, it's up to you. You don't let other people tell you what you have to and don't have to do. This is your life. If they don't like what you're doing, they don't have to come around. So you have to make these decisions for yourself. And like I said, you are going to get a lot of conflicting opinions. Some people are going to tell you no matter what they do, their family put up with them. And I'm going to tell you that's a load of shit. That is a load of shit. You do the best that you can. You know, you try to have the best relationship that you can. And if the other person makes that impossible, then you give some distance and try to have a long distance relationship, you know? And if that can't work, if that is still problematic, then some of the times you do have to sever ties even from family members. They even say that on Intervention. You know that I love that show Intervention, where they have somebody who's an addict come on the show and their family members come do an intervention. They sit around them and tell them they love them and cry and stuff like that. And one of the things that the therapists always say, damn near every episode, is sometimes you have to remove yourself from the person's life. Now, in these cases, usually they have to remove themselves because either the person is abusing them, stealing from them, hitting them, taking their belongings. I saw this one girl who was beating her mom up. I mean, they were doing all kind of things to their family members. And the counselors were like, you absolutely do have to cut that behavior off. And other times they have to cut it off because they're enabling the person. So they're keeping them sick. But the counselors all agree that sometimes you absolutely do have to cut off family members. And this whole, concept of blood being thicker than water, to me, is more like a prison, because it's in people's minds, and they'll let somebody abuse them for decades who they normally would not. I know people who normally would not put up with this behavior who will put up with it because they got that in their mind. Oh, well, it's my family, and what are people going to say? some of these people do it more so because of what people are going to think of them than because they think it's the right thing to do. I was talking to one of my family members once, and when her father got sickly, she started taking care of her father. Her father had never taken care of her, never been near for her, barely saw the man. The man could barely make time to even visit when he was, younger and healthy. So when he got old and sick, she started taking care of him. And I said to her, why would you do that? I remember her pain from him not being there for her. And I was like, why would you do that? Why would you put yourself into this position that you're saying is a hardship? Why would you do that for a person who really wasn't even in your life? And she said, because I don't want to feel guilty later on. And I said, well, what would make you feel guilty? She said, well, people will talk. And I'm like, so you're taking care of him so you won't feel guilty if people start talking about how you didn't take care of him when he got older. So this isn't for him, and it's not for you. It's because you're afraid of what people are going to say. You're afraid of appearances. You're afraid of you looking bad. And I was like, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't put myself in that position, and like I said, it wasn't like he called her and said, I need some help. She, went to see him because she was always going down there trying to be in his life. And she saw the conditions that he was living in and took it upon herself to take him in and to care for him. And I was sitting there looking at her like, you done lost your mind. So a lot of times it's because of that notion, again, blood is thicker than water. What are people going to say if I'm not doing this for my blood? You see? So there are times when we have to be forgiving with our family, with our friends. There are times when we have to go 20 rounds with them. But when they're abusing us, we are absolutely not obligated to put up with their abuse. If you choose to, that's on you. But let it be because that's what you chose to do, not because you're afraid of what other people are going to think of you. Okay? So, like I said before, if it's me and my family member is abusing me, I create space. I create a great deal of space. And the more stupid they act, the more space I put between us. And eventually you come to this space where you're in your own orbit, and you don't have that interaction going back and forth, the negative interaction going back and forth. So if your Voldemort is your family member, the other thing you need to do is get some therapy. I believe strongly in therapy. You guys know that. But especially when it comes to abuse, it's going to be very difficult for you to move on with your life if you're still harboring hurt and resentment from people, period, but especially people who are supposed to love you, protect you, care for you, have your back. You see? Because our culture has taught us that these people are supposed to treat us special because we have their blood. And when that doesn't happen, in a lot of cases, it's going to be extremely painful. The closer they are to you, the more painful it can be. So really consider getting some help with it. A lot of times it's not easy to get through these things and you need help. And Aquarius oftentimes can cut people off or distance themselves pretty easily, but not always. So if you're Aquarius or not, and you find yourself in this situation, really consider getting some help and consider the distance. Like I said, the more they act up, the more distance I put. Okay? All right, guys, it's time for me to get going. So I hope, Jordan, that answers your question, okay? And if you have more questions, you know to drop them for me in the comment section because I'll be happy to answer them. All right, guys, come back soon because I have a lot more to say. And remember, if you want to get a reading, my email will be underneath this video. My next opening isn't until October 22nd. So if you want a reading, don't wait. Jump on making your appointments as soon as you know that you want it. Because generally, I'm between 1 to 3 weeks booked in advance. Okay? All right, guys. See you later.